If you are new to API and wanting to give it a try through Python, here is a tutorial that will show you from the very beginning to the end to make your first API call. So to request data through API, you will need a few things. The first thing is a developer token. The developer token can be requested from the ads account that you wanted to get the access from. And the second thing is to register an application. The application allows you to authenticate user and request user consent for the app to access the account data and manage the data requests. Once you have the developer token and the application ID, which is also called client ID, you will be able to request the access token that allow you to request access to the ads account data that you or the user just provided consent have access to. The next thing you'll need is a virtual Python environment and install the Bean Ads SDK. The virtual Python environment will help you install the Bean Ads SDK and also execute the libraries and models inside that SDK in a Python script. And with all what I just mentioned, you are ready to make your first API call. Before we get started, I'm Jocelyn. I'm a data analyst passionate about data analytics and software engineering topics. I hope we both can learn something together.
So imagine you wanted to see how to do Bing Ads API. So Google search this and then click on the Microsoft documentation. Then you should go to Sandbox. One good thing about Sandbox is here highlighted. Ads you created in Sandbox are not served. So it means you are not gonna charge for those ads that you created, but they will still provide you some dummy data so you can practice. So that's set up the Sandbox environment. Follow the steps. So you need to go to this on this page. As you see, it has a sandbox domain in the front. So here, whenever you enter your account or sign up for a new one, it's all inside this sandbox environment, and it will create a test account instead of the real one. So you click on get a new email address. So as you see here, this domain is also to show that it's a sandbox domain because it's not the normal Outlook email address. So let's put in Jocelyn Chen test. We'll just put in the password as you would for any other accounts, and then we'll do Jocelyn Chen. And then just put some dummy data. You should be fine for the test account. For example. Okay. Just follow through these steps. Okay, and you need to put alternate email address so they can send you authentication code. So we'll do contact Jocelyn Chen at gmail.com. Put in the authentication. So here is the part that, as you see, you have to enter this email address, finish the workflow by specifying the rest of your user, security information, and you do need to create an actual, not the actual, but the test ads account. And for import create, it tells you to skip campaign creation. For go live, skip payment information. So we have to follow these steps, but you can put whatever you want. Okay, seems working. Let's wait. Great. So you're now in the import create campaign. You have the option to import from Google Ads like in the real world, but for now we want to create a new campaign. Even though it's in the instruction tell you to skip, but because we do want to get some test data, so we have to add a keyword, at least one keyword for the dummy data to flows in. So we just try doing the minimum as we can, and let's just create an ads. Okay, so for this is how you would create an ads as in a real account. So let's just try putting this documentation as the ads link. In the headline, for example, we say Bing as API to Oreo. And then we said API sandbox. I think they need at least 3 headlines, so we put one more. So for example, no code experience friendly. No code experience friendly, and then path we can skip it. Description, you say that make your first API call in minutes and see, let's say beginner is welcome. Okay, so let's see if we can save it like this. Okay, now is the key part because you need to add some keywords. Let's say Bing adds API and API. What is that? Okay, API Sandbox. Okay, budget, just put in whatever because as long as you don't put the actual payment method, you're good. Okay, let's see if that they take it. Okay, great. So for this is the one that you do want it to skip, just skip it. And then we should go to the ads account. Great, you see the search campaign one is created. And if you click on the search campaign, you should go to the ad groups, just the ad group one, and then you should go to the keyword level. That's the two keywords we're trying to test. Okay, let's go back to the instruction. And based on what I've read previously, so I think there are some good reminder or information I provided at the bottom. Reporting services. So when you create a keyword, test performance data should be generated within a few hours. Based on my experience, it did not taking too long. You can check out the next day and the data should be there. And the other thing to know is test data is generated only for the same day when the entity was added or updated. You have to be mindful about what the report period time frame that you specify because the test data will only be available on the same day you add it. Okay. The other thing to know is that you should not use the test data to infer or expect similar performance in the production environment because those are just fake data. Okay, so we're good at this part. So I will tell you, here's where you find it. Go to get started. And then here's what we want. Get started using Python. And there are two options. And the most common one is to create a desktop application in Python. So let's click into that. So it has pretty detailed walkthrough. So let's look at the instruction. So for you to run the Python script, you need to have at least two credentials. One is developer token, and the second is the client ID, which is also called the application ID or app ID. So you will need to follow the instructions. So for example, developer token, I think it links you to another more detailed documentation. So as you see, you should pretty much find everything you need. Okay, so how to get the developer token? You need to go to this advertising developer portal, and you will need to log into your real ads account. For example, here the Sandbox account. So in the real world, you'll just enter the actual account, and you should be able to request the developer token inside once you log in. Okay, so imagine you're good with the developer token. Where is it? Okay. Then the second thing is to get the app ID. You can imagine app is a platform that manage all the requests and temporarily store those data. So you have to first register an application for developer before you can do API. Generally, that applies to most of the ads API, like Google API also, you need an application. So here you need to sign into Microsoft Azure. We're not gonna demonstrate here, but you should be able to ask your developer in the company, or if you're the one that manages the app, then you'll directly have those access. So once you have the developer token and application ID, now the next step is to create a virtual environment for Python. So let's do that by going to a terminal. So we already have the dev folder created, the cd into dev, and then we can take a look what's inside. What I'm gonna do is to create a folder directly for being at, let's say being at API. So let's cd into the folder we just created. So then once we have this folder created, the next step is to create a virtual environment. And before we do that, there is some checkup that you'll need to do. The checkup is to ensure that you have the Python installed. So for example, if you enter Python 3 and it directly go to the Python mode, it means that you have Python installed and then you can exit. And the other way to check is that to use Python 3 dash and capital V to check the version of the Python. So since you have 3.0 10 version here installed, so you're good to go. So now we are ready to install the environment. So here in the documentation, it has the PowerShell syntax. In Mac, what we'll do it is to Python 3-m and create this virtual environment, and you can call it env. So it'll take a few seconds to run. So now it finished running. The next thing, very important, is to activate the virtual environment. So again, the PowerShell syntax in their documentation. So for Mac, what you need to do it is to source being activate. Okay, it said being activated in such. Okay, so the thing it is, you'll need to go into that environment you just created, because now what you want to activate is that environment folder. So sitting into this environment, and let's take a look. You see here we have this bin folder. That's where the content is activated file. So now you should be able to source bin activate, and you should be able to find the activated file. So perfect. Now you see this environment in front. It means that you are entering into this virtual environment. So the next thing is see here is install the bin as SDK. So in Mac, you can directly pip install bin as. Okay, let's let it run. Usually it is quite quick. So as you see here, it finished running, has this warning, but it's nothing critical. It's just to tell you you should update your pip. So we can just copy paste the same code, and then now it successfully uninstall the old version, install the latest version. Okay, so now you should have this SDK to run all the necessary library. So now you should, I recommend you start opening a Python editor. So I'll open the Visual Studio Code. Okay. So that code dot command is something that you can configure. The way to configure is Command Shift and P. That way you'll go into this, and then what you can do it is install this code command in path. So that way you can type in code space dot to open the folder in Visual Studio Code. So now you're in this environment folder. On the left, you can see you have this bin, include library, and library, if you click into that, that's where it's it include all the bin as SDK you just installed. Okay, so let's again put them into split screen. Okay, so now we're in a split screen. So let's move it a little bit smaller. So the next step is to copy paste the get started py file. So let's do that. Copy, and we wanted to create a file. The level is usually important. You wanted to create inside this env. So let's call them old.py, and then we can paste the code. Okay, so so here you see this yellow underline. Basically, it's saying that import could not be resolved. So one thing we can try to open up their command palette, Command Shift and P, and let's select an interpreter. The interpreter we're wanting to select is the virtual environment, because we create a virtual environment for this project. But as you see here, the reason why it couldn't import is because they didn't detect any virtual environment. They're supposed to show me a path that access the Python in this env folder, because that's where we have all the Python, actually here, the bin folder, all the Python 3.10 installed, where it was installed. So one way I know that to troubleshoot this is usually you have to open up the bin API folder directory instead of inside this env folder. So what we can do, let's just save this change first, the copy paste code. And then let's go to another folder where the directly open from the bin API. So it's inside the dev, and then let's do that. Inside the bin API, and then there's an environment folder. So let's open it up as old.py again. So as you see, here the arrow is gone, because that way you will be able to, let's try out the Command Shift and P again. Let's select an interpreter. This time we have to select the virtual environment we create, where inside the bin folder it has the Python executor. So let's do that. So that way you will be able to access the SDK we use the virtual environment to install. So that's good. Okay, so the next step following based on some of the reminder here, the to-do is the one we wanted to change. So the to-do, there are two things, client ID and developer token. So for our case, because we want to try out in a sandbox, so we don't have to put in our production real accounts credential. So let's go back to their documentation, I believe. Let's go back to the sandbox. Okay. And they supposed to have, yes. So this string over here is the developer token. So let's copy that and then replace in this to do. And the longer string here is the client ID or the app ID. So once we replace these two value, very important, the environment we also need to change to sandbox. In refresh token, once we run this file, they should create a refresh.txt file to store the refresh token. So essentially, this file is to define this authenticate function that will take the authorization data, where if you scroll all the way down, the authorization data, including developer token and the client ID that we just specify up on the top. So this whole script is to help us authenticate that the app can access data and manage data requests. So let's try run this. And then we run Python file in terminal. Okay, so this is good. It prompts us to this as accounts that we just create in the sandbox environment. So let's just sign in. And usually they say that we have to verify. They now do this two steps authentication. So we just put the email address we put earlier, and then let's give it a try. Once you got the code, just put it right here. Here is the next screen. Instead of showing you anything, what we need is the URL, because in the URL it has this authorization code that we need. So let's copy this, go back to where we are, and because here they have this prompt, please enter the response URI, which is the link that you just copied. So hit enter. So yes, so it ran successfully. So you'll be thinking, what is all this return output? So basically, if you scroll all the way down in the main execution, it do two things. One is authorization, authenticate this function, and it also with this service specified for customer service to call their service client library. Essentially, what it returns is some of the accounts management the user management level information. If you scroll a little bit up, you can see that it returns you who is the user of this ad account and so on. And that's it. So that's how we authenticate the app. So let's go back to the documentation. The next step, it is the most important one, because once we allow the app to manage the API, then we wanted to call their reporting service. So where you'll be able to request data from the ads account. So I believe there's some, you click on reporting API, go to their overview, scroll all the way down, you will see this report request, for example, that's what you need. So in this code example, important thing is just change the script you wanted to use. In this case, is Python. There's some sample code to help you get started. So let's copy again and create a new file inside the environment. Let's call them report service.py, and then paste the code here. So let's take a look what this script is about. So you see again this arrow. What it means is they now have to import from the other file just created, because that's where you define the authenticate function. So you need to use this file to import all the function you have, but the file name is no longer called auth helper. So now you just need to change it to whatever that you name your other file. So in our case, we call it auth. So okay, there's some issue with the hierarchy again. So let's push this out so they are on the same level. Because before it was inside either the library or the other folder. So as you see here, when they are in the same hierarchy, the oath is no longer with the yellow underline. And what else we need to change? There are a few things. So report file format, because after we run this script, what it does is it will downloads the report into the CSV file. You can change it to Excel, anything file format you prefer. And the file directory is very important because you want it to store it somewhere, but obviously this is a default, and this is for Windows. So you want it to change into your own path. So what we do is we create a folder called reports. And then we can directly copy the path here and then just replace it. So here you go, you specify where you want it to store the downloaded file. And the result file name, that's where I made some custom change. I think it will be more useful. And I already create that file in another Visual Studio project. So let's open that one up. It will be easier. Okay. So I have this open right here. So as you see here, we have the reports as the same setup as we did earlier. We have the report service.py, auth.py file. So let's take a look. What did I do? So I specify the file directory and the result file name. I want it to be a little bit tailored. What the purpose of doing this is I want every day when I request the API, they will be able to store the file separately. So the first thing I do is I define dates, which will grab whatever today's date is, and then I will concatenate it with this result underscore with that date and dot file in the lower case. So you can even take a look. I already ran a few examples. So you'll be able to see that every day's file was created separately. So that's another customization I did. And the other thing, we can scroll a little bit down. The other thing you will need to keep in mind or change if you want is the output, the report metadata. So the metadata basically return you some summary. So what it does is if this output has impressions or has the clicks, you will basically sum up the total impression, clicks, and the spend. The spend is where I customize. So I wanted to add the total spend because spend usually is important business metrics, and I also calculate the average spend. So in the output, they will not just gonna give you this, as you see here, a sneak peek about the data itself. It kind of give you like a summary about how many impression in this report are downloaded, clicks, total spend, and calculate the average accordingly. So that's another thing I added spend. And the other thing is also this very important part down here. Here is to specify what do you want it to request it, the data. Basically, you want all the columns to be configured based on the business needs. So here I done some research to include the ones I think most of the standard report will need. So I put it in here. And below this green comment line, the below ones are some nice to have. But it's totally up to you. You can go to this documentation already linked here. They will show you all the metrics, what is name, and then you can add it or exclude things that you might not want. So that's the last thing that you will need to I have changed in this file. So if we take a quick look at the main execution, what it does is it has this authorization data, which is needed in the authenticate function that you specify in the old file. And the other thing is that in the main function it defined earlier, it will run through this reporting service manager that will request the campaign performance report. So that's pretty much all you need to know, and let's give it a try. So before that, let's kill this one. So we have a little clear view. Let's give it a try here. The reason why it doesn't pop up that Windows in the browser is because we already have the refresh text file. So once that was created, the next time you don't really need to go through that login process. Basically, they will just automatically refresh this text file if you need it. Okay, let's take a look. Okay, So it actually doesn't return any report data. So that's also not a good thing to demonstrate. The reason why is because, as you might remember earlier, the dummy data created on the date only for that day that you add the keyword. So I added the keyword in the Sandbox account a while ago. So let's specify the correct time period. So here the time period is yesterday because I created probably like 2 weeks ago. So that's the very important thing. You might not wanting to change it to last 30 days. So the place to check how do they call this predefined time is go to their documentation and can show you. And remember, it's in the reporting API and the data objects overview, and probably can search on the dates. Okay, they even have a subpage for that. And the report time and the report time periods. Yeah, that's where it has all the different. Yeah, so I didn't even specify it right. So it's good to just refer to the document because every different API sometimes they just like to use different name. So let's go back to the other one. This one I added the file and change this time periods. So let's give it a try again. Okay, it might take a while. Okay, so the file already exists. So that's a good call. We have to delete it because um, they wanted to create the customized file name I specified, but because that file name already exists, so it doesn't overwrite that. So that's also another good thing to as a sanity check, because if you only allowed one file to be created one day, then it also help with the version control. So it will return you an error saying that, hey, something is wrong, and that's where you know today the API already being requested. So we already the data file is running again. Yes. As you see here, it has the summary data. It has the CSV file created with a summary also show up in the data frame here. So usually what we do the next step, it is we want this data frame show so we can directly use that data frame to import the data into maybe our SQL Server, our database. As you can see, it's not as complicated as you might think to make API calls. API is to help you request data like you would to log into the account yourself. But now with the API, you can just run it through the backend and even automate it to request data on a regular basis without you doing anything. I hope you learned something from this video. You can access the script in the description box. And don't forget to comment down below if you are interested to see other tutorial for APIs, and let me know what other data sources you are interested to see. And I'll see you next time. Bye.